Science fiction. For the sake of the argument, let's just pretend we don't know what that means. Those two words could even feel odd next to each other, one covering descriptions of nature, observations, things that have logical basis or verifiable evidence behind them, and the other describing imagination, free from constraints of the real world, the complete opposite. It would be hard to imagine how these two could possibly fit together, but they do, and this connection is surprisingly seamless. The start of science fiction as a self-conscious genre dates to around 1926 with the founding of the Amazing Stories magazine, entirely devoted to science fiction stories. Stories we'd now call science fiction existed previous to that, the all-time classic Frankenstein, Jules Verne's stories such as Journey to the Center of the Earth, From the Earth to the Moon, and similar works, H.G. Wells's The Time Machine, The War of the Worlds, and the list could go on. Going back even further, many scholars think the oldest surviving story that has elements of science fiction is the ancient Mesopotamian text, Epic of Gilgamesh, dating back to around 2000 BC. Today it's one of the most prolific genres. It can deal with both the bad and the good side of technology. You can imagine a world where everything goes wrong, also a utopia where everything goes well. You could show solutions, paths you think humans are walking, and let your audience decide whether that is something they would want. It can be used to show the two sides of the same coin, the dangers and the opportunities of technology. The same way real technological advancements usually prompt two different kinds of reactions from the public: caution, sometimes even outrage, and excitement. Describing what is and isn't science fiction can be a bit tricky, especially looking at media today, which is all over the place. The Oxford Dictionary defines science fiction as... I'm just kidding, I'm not doing that. As with most things, we could set certain rules to say what it is and isn't, but that's not what I'm interested in at the moment, and I don't think those kinds of rules hold up very well. In the end of the day, they are opinions, and these are mine. Right now I want to see how these two seemingly very different things, science and fiction, come together. If you Google science and movies in the same sentence, most often the result that will pop up first are a bunch of articles listing movies with good and bad science behind them. And you'll quickly see that good science and bad science won't automatically mean a good or bad film. You wouldn't dare to call Jurassic Park a bad movie, even though it's probably the first example these articles bring up as having very bad science behind it. Do people like Interstellar because it includes scientifically accurate black hole representations, or is there a different reason? I do understand that science is a tool in fiction and it shouldn't bother me too much when they misrepresent it or say outright false things for the plot, but I also tend to whine a lot about inaccuracies on this channel, so let's say that this video is therapy. I also think sometimes the discussion isn't in the right place. What we need to promote more is scientific literacy and not accuracy. Those are not the same thing, and yes, I am going through all this. And you can't stop me! I very much enjoy media that at least do the effort to get things right, but I also enjoy things that don't. So please don't come for me with the pitchforks for what I'm about to say. Good movies kind of don't need good science. James Watson and Francis Crick described the structure of the DNA double helix in a one-page paper published in 1953. This event is marked as the beginning of the molecular biology field as a whole, the thing modern medicine is practically based on. Usually when people describe scientific discoveries, they try to build it up in a linear fashion, one experiment following the other, gathering clues that culminate in something revolutionary in the end. But science isn't linear, and this discovery wasn't either. Numerous scientists were quite close to the double helix. All the required evidence was already out there, scattered around. People just tried to piece the puzzle together in different ways. The most important piece was a picture that no one else seemed to have. Photograph 51 taken by skilled chemist and X-ray crystallographer Rosalind Franklin. It might not seem like much, but this is a picture of DNA. More accurately, the X-rays diffracted by a crystallized DNA molecule, and this X pattern to experienced scientists like Watson and Crick gave important clues about the structure. In the end, their conclusions proved to be the correct ones, which expectedly got them the Nobel Prize. But this isn't the glittery or wonderful science story it might seem at a first glance. Photograph 51 was shown to Watson and Crick by Rosalind's estranged colleague without her knowledge, and she was never credited for her contributions just until very recently, long after her death. She was also constantly patronized and called Rosie by her colleagues, a nickname she hated, which just represents how women were treated not only in science but in general back then. Watson's book, The Double Helix, included unfortunate portrayals of scientists, including his colleague, Crick, who thought the book distorted his motives, betrayed their friendship, and grossly invaded his privacy. He tried to stop it from being published, but eventually gave in and concluded that if the book showed an unfortunate portrayal of a scientist, that was of Watson, not him. The discovery was a culmination of multiple things: skill, knowledge, a bit of luck, and likely a bit of malevolence too. How similarly do you think their finding was reported in the published scientific paper? A structure for nucleic acid has already been proposed by Pauling and Corey near the fiber axis, and the basis on the X-ray diagrams is the salt, has two helical chains, each coiled round the same axis. It is not clear what forces would hold the structure together. Of phosphate diester groups joining beta-D-deoxyribofuranose residues with 3,5 linkages. In the scientific paper, they talk about the science. Angstroms, polarities, properties of the chemical structure, water contents, all that matters when you want to discuss empirical facts while also throwing a bit of shade. Another three-chain structure has also been suggested by Fraser. This structure, as described, is rather ill-defined, and for this reason we shall not comment on it. Fraser's model is so bad, we're not even going to explain why. What I'm trying to get at here, completely accurate science isn't entertainment. It's lectures. The scientific method isn't fun. Scientists working in laboratories and getting good results is rarely the dramatic moment you see on screen. If you're not familiar with biochemistry, then most things discussed in their paper will be basically gibberish. Scientific literature expects a certain level of expertise of the reader. If you don't have that, explaining all basic things and why they make sense together will take forever. This leaves people writing dramas about science with two options. Either simplify the science so it's easier to explain but less accurate, or don't bother with explaining all parts and treat the exposition as a dramatic element without explaining everything to the viewer. The way they did in the film about the DNA double helix discovery, a 1987 episode of the BBC series Horizon titled Life Story. I want to go back to the roots for a bit and bring in the dramatic structure chart we've all seen at some point in school. This story about the double helix can actually fit this quite well without too many adjustments. In the beginning, we get to know Watson, Crick, and Wilkins. They start working together, realize their common interests. We get to know Rosalind Franklin, who appears to be difficult to work with but produces very impressive results. We hear about other scientists at different universities who work on the DNA structure as well. We even meet some of them. The tension builds. Chargaff is very rude and sees them as idiots, but still gives them his results. Then Watson and Crick learn a competitor is going to publish a paper with his theory. They receive the manuscript. The race to the finish line begins. Then, after lots of trial and error, input from others, sneakily obtained data, they build their model. They did it. All go to wonder at their metal contraption, the key to life, in all its beautiful, elegant simplicity. This film actually included a surprising amount of science, and most of it is very accurate, which is achieved by having Watson and Crick discuss their work constantly on screen. But the viewer still isn't going to walk away with a complete knowledge of molecular biology. What they'll remember is the race between scientists, the raising of the stakes when a different scientist got closer and closer to solving the structure, the power plays and sneaking around, and the eventual victory. Science is data. Dry data is pretty boring, and that's the one thing entertainment shouldn't be. That's why they tell stories, because that's what we like. The more science you want to include, which is mostly long expositions with lots of complicated words, the more you'll risk boring your audience. And lots of exposition can also risk having your characters and dialogue ruined. You can only go so far without making your thing unwatchable. We have to keep in mind that the goals of storytelling and science are vastly different. Science is complex, wordy, very often ambiguous, believe it or not, and most of all, it's very rarely visually exciting. There's no time to stop for an experiment that can take hours or days. Ideas need to be simplified so the average viewer can understand it, and they have to be straightforward so they are not confusing. But this is something certain scientists have beef with. Jack Horner, a paleontologist who served as an advisor on Jurassic Park, apparently didn't like the excavation scene. He thought it should have been more accurate and therefore much longer, but the focus wasn't on that, was it? It was a plot element to move the story forward. It didn't need to be realistic to achieve that. It's nice when a movie does the effort, but let us be realistic too and accept that complaining about an excavation not being realistic in Jurassic Park is like going hiking and complaining that the view sucked because you had dirty glasses. Writers often don't look for exact ways to use science because they are looking for scientific concepts that could nourish their creativity. Something that could serve an idea, help to bring the story to life. I could talk a lot about the scientific inaccuracies in Gattaca, and I did, but that's just being pedantic, isn't it? Does it even matter if the analyzer looks like a printer? If a character just reads a raw DNA sequence from a sheet of paper? It certainly annoys me, that's for sure, but the story isn't about those things. And showing isolating DNA, running the sequencer for hours and then analyzing the results for a couple more hours isn't good storytelling. Scientists also often underestimate the power of a good analogy. Writers don't. Remember the scene from Interstellar when the scientist explains the concept of a wormhole?
So they say you want to go from here to there, but it's too far, right? Mm-hmm. So a wormhole bends space like this, so you can take a shortcut through a higher dimension.
I certainly do. I know that Christopher Nolan didn't come up with that, but it's short, quick, compares the idea to something the average viewer can relate to, and you get it right away. Analogies are good because they aren't as likely to annoy people who know the subject, and it doesn't feel like an idea that's been dumbed down. What even is good science anyway? Does Blade Runner need similar accuracy to, say, Oppenheimer? What makes this topic particularly challenging to talk about is the fact that we know it depends on a lot of things how much of the science you need to get right. So I made a graph like a normal person. Behold the Accuracy Enjoyability Index. It needs a better name. Right now it is tailored to include all kinds of media involving science, not just science fiction. On the y-axis we have accuracy. The more scientifically accurate a piece of media is, the higher it is. On the x-axis we have enjoyability. Left is least enjoyable and right is most enjoyable. Just because something was based on sound science, that doesn't mean you're going to enjoy watching it. I'm starting to realize I just love visualizing my thoughts and pointing at things while I talk. Starting from the most accurate. This entire section, everything or almost everything in them is great, sound science stuff. You can say it's about real science. It's documentaries. We already discussed why it's incredibly hard to show actual good science, so if you want your stuff to be mostly accurate, you might as well only talk about it and eliminate most story elements. They're still not always accurate though. Those well-rounded stories you see in nature documentaries don't happen in front of the cameras, but instead they emerge from the editing room. But as with any other genre, science and nature documentaries aren't all good, so they're all over the enjoyability spectrum. Right below documentaries are pieces that should have science as close to realistic as possible, but aren't necessarily about the science. They are more often about real events or real scientists who lived or still live in some cases. Since they are based on reality, something that's very obviously not realistic will immediately throw people off. Like Oppenheimer, those things happened. Those people existed. They had to get them mostly right. A Beautiful Mind. John Nash was a real person and his work was very real too. The movie's explanation of game theory does leave some things to be desired, but there was no room to explain all that there. Chernobyl. They had to get most of the explosion, the causes and the aftermath right. Not all of it. It also needed a story, obviously. And this is where it gets a bit more complicated. You might notice that this is where my chart stops being divided into quadrants based on accuracy only. Anything below this imaginary line that I just put there so I could visualize something is science fiction. It can't go above a certain threshold because at that point you will have to sacrifice something. If you want everything in your film to be totally accurate, you'll have to either give up most of the fiction or even most of the story. Or you can make some kind of an experimental mix of the two and end up on the periphery somewhere, like National Geographic's Mars, that mixes a documentary with science fiction. Bad sci-fi usually isn't bad because of scientific inaccuracy. They are bad because of bad storytelling, bad characters, incoherent rules within the world itself, all that. They are just unenjoyable to watch. They can be as scientifically accurate as they want, but that won't help the other flaws. And this, I'm just calling this section no for simplicity's sake. These are not accurate and not enjoyable. Anything that falls here probably shouldn't exist. Baby geniuses. That fucking Purdue marketing video where they claim that opioids are not addicting, that could go in there since that is obviously fiction. Generic sci-fi checks all the boxes. Hero character, decent world and setup, big conflict, resolving of that big conflict, usually by a great sacrifice, blah blah blah. It's enjoyable but not that memorable. It's usually something you'll watch once, like it fine, and that's about it. The science can be good, but that can only take you so far. Now, great sci-fi. These are great movies that not only happen to be sci-fi, but they made tremendous effort to get as many things right as they could. Like Arrival. The parts they did include from actual science, linguistics and physics were pretty solid, but it also involves alien technology. It can't be all accurate. Interstellar. This movie is constantly praised for the visualization of wormholes and black holes based on actual scientific theory, but they still have magical gravity in their spacecraft and all the love stuff. Contact. So many things were on point in this, while still being mainly a human story, but alien technology, again, it can't possibly be all correct. 2001: A Space Odyssey. I don't think I have to explain this one. If you want to get at least something right, that gives you a set of constraints. Great sci-fi can't be just fun. It has to adhere to some rules to keep that element. That doesn't mean you can't have fun with sci-fi though. You'll just have to let go a bit more. Leave the constraints of real science and enter the world of Jurassic Park, Blade Runner, Back to the Future, Star Trek, The Fifth Element, Cowboy Bebop. The possibilities here are endless.
Lilu Dallas Multipass.
You're no longer confined by pesky rules of the real world. You can do whatever you want. Well, as long as it's set in a form of human world. This is where I might piss some people off, but I don't consider Star Wars science fiction. It's set in space, but it also has the magical force in it. Before you want to murder me, that doesn't mean it's not good, it's just space fantasy. I left my favorite for last. Most enjoyable, but absolutely not accurate at all. This is Camp.
And remember, my friend, future events such as these will affect you in the future.
Camp is pretty hard to define, but there's a point when you don't believe anything that's happening. It's not consistent, it doesn't make sense, it's not believable for any reason. Using most standards, it would be tacky or bad, but you love it. And not despite, but because of it. It also has a kind of honesty or purity to it. I think Ed Wood's Plan 9 from Outer Space is great. Camp and Sharknado 2, 3, whatever that were made to be intentionally so bad it's good, usually aren't. Since we're on the topic of camp, I want to introduce you to a true gem from my home country, Tales of Pirks. Tales of Pirks the Pilot was a short-lived sci-fi series released in 1972 in Hungary. The base material of the same name was written by Polish science fiction writer Stanislav Lem and published in 1965 in the Soviet Union. The title is telling enough. The book is a collection of short stories describing the adventures of a spaceship captain named Pirks. The TV series was created with an insanely low budget. The whole thing was shot using the blue box technique, which would be green screen today, using household items as set pieces that are not at all ambiguous. That's clearly a matchbox and not a real car. That thing in the background is obviously a lemon squeezer. Who even thought we wouldn't notice that this spaceship is a screwdriver? They didn't bother too much about building sets for the show and only used 2 cameras. One filming the actors and one filming the scenery they projected on the backdrop. Those household items masquerading as something else gives the whole show a childlike charm. It's how kids play if you think about it, finding a screwdriver and imagining it as a rocket for their dolls. This show is very weird and very few of my friends have even heard of it, which is a shame because I adore it with all my heart and I want everyone in the world to learn about it. I don't know how all of this happened, but the fact that Western entertainment was not allowed in Hungary back then in the Star Trek, the original series was released only a couple of years before this came out, gives me some ideas. Listen, so there's this show called Star Trek and people are apparently liking it. You know we are not showing that on our channels. Of course not, but don't you think people would like something similar? We could make our own thing. I actually brought some things for the set. My life is complete now. I know that this chart is far from perfect, like if we take science seriously then we know that accuracy is very relative. When Frankenstein was first published, it was based on what was believed to be true back then. So if I had to, I'd place Frankenstein here, even though it's not at all accurate today. There's another thing we can include on this graph. Suspension of disbelief. Letting go of the obvious falsities to just have fun. To enjoy and become immersed in a story, temporarily we have to believe that what we're seeing is all true. The film can include obvious forced things, technology that would be impossible, acts that completely defy the laws of physics, but none of that will bother the audience as long as you promise that it's all normal within the world you created. And those worlds have their own rules you won't break. It goes the opposite of accuracy. The more scientifically accurate something is, the fewer things you need to let go of in order to enjoy it. Less accurate, more suspension of disbelief is needed. So if something is not quite right, it won't matter. You're not bothered by a pencil piercing a man's skull in a movie with a rich dude dressed as a bat to fight bad guys. But when something is very accurate, even minute things can throw you off. If Apollo 13, a film about a real event in space, would have the same kind of magical artificial gravity that exists in most sci-fi films, it would look super dumb. Even if you let go of the rules of the real world, you need to set new ones in the world you created. It doesn't matter if the things you include aren't realistic, just make sure they are consistent. Did you know that people only use 10% of their brains? And that the previous sentence was a lie? It's only one of the most widely believed myths of our day. It's not clear where the myth started. Many trace it to the misunderstanding of a 1907 paper titled Energies of Man that talked about how we feel like we can't do everything we think we should be able to, both physically and mentally. Here's a PET scan of healthy brain activity. The areas that light up are active, that's nearly all of it. Brain activity doesn't only mean cognitive function. If I move my arm, that's a lot of brain activity and not all of it is conscious. But the 10% myth is known enough to inspire several media pieces. In the 2011 movie Limitless, Bradley Cooper portrays a struggling writer. His life is not getting any better, he lacks motivation, ambition, any kind of drive to improve himself and his situation. He's given an experimental drug called NZT48 that basically makes him superhuman. His focus improves, he's smarter, has better perception, and writes his book he's been struggling with in a night. The drug allows him to use more of his brain power than people normally can and becomes a completely changed person. This movie obviously took inspiration from the 10% myth, but the way the whole thing is written and constructed, it feels like it's okay. The main character uses the drug for a while and then starts to experience side effects, blacking out for longer and longer time periods, increasing in frequency the longer he uses the drug, then learns that everyone who uses it is either hospitalized or dead. In the film's context, the brain isn't meant to be used to this extent, and sooner or later it crashes. They established in the beginning that the drug makes you use more of your brain, you'll be able to do things you'd associate with more brain activity, and that's it. It stays true to that. Let's contrast this with another film that also took inspiration from this myth. Lucy. The movie literally opens with Morgan Freeman giving a lecture on how we use only 10% of our brains. Lucy is the main character, played by Scarlett Johansson. Her boyfriend tricks her into smuggling drugs, she gets captured and the bag is sewn into her abdomen, gets kicked in the stomach, and a large quantity is released into her system. And she is gradually able to use more of her brain and gets superpowers. We later learn that drug is apparently a substance pregnant women produce in the 6th week in a small quantity so they can handle the burden of pregnancy. She gets a much larger dose though, so she becomes able to time travel, use telekinesis, telepathy, among several other things. They established in the beginning that the drug makes you use more of your brain, and that means any laws of reality won't apply to you, apparently. But if you, as a viewer, don't care about any of that, the acting and the visuals are pretty great, so if you can forgive the plot, then this movie can be a fun watch. Both Limitless and Lucy start with the films establishing that this happens in our world. In Limitless, you aren't required to suddenly believe a lot more in order to keep enjoying the film. Everything that happens stays true to the basic setting, while Lucy does a terrible job at this. It starts off with the same premise, a drug that allows you to use more of your brain, and in the end, she becomes a literal god when she uses 100%. On the level of believability, it's not even close to the basic premise we were told in the beginning. If you want to keep your audience, you have to be consistent with how much you expect them to release their understanding of the real world. And if you want to escalate, provide good reasons for it. You also can't just pick one thing. If you want to take that one thing to the extreme, you need to adjust everything around it as well. I've actually thought a lot about this, and I don't believe you can put your story in a superposition so it's both here and here. If it starts as moderately accurate but later turns out that it's not really, you still have to justify why it seemed all right at the beginning. Also, when you're writing a story, you don't start with the level of accuracy you want to deal with. The story will largely determine what you need to cover in order to make it believable. For example, all of Star Trek have striking inaccuracies when it comes to reality, but it's not trying to be accurate like that. Narayan Shankar, an editor on Star Trek: The Next Generation with a PhD in engineering, admitted that the dramatic appeal always came first and not scientific accuracy. But they also had a detailed manual of all the starship's engineering features to make sure they knew how things worked and stayed consistent. Interestingly, I think alien technology is a really good way out of this. Who says aliens couldn't visit today and possess tech that could do things we previously thought were impossible? Careful with this one, though. It could very well seem like a cheap attempt to save a story that seems nonsensical. Science fiction is usually loosely based on real scientific concepts, myths. From a creative standpoint, establishing that your story is set around today gives you lots of limitations. People know what reality looks like. You can't bend that too much, and if you do, you need to give very good explanations, like it only looks like reality, but it's actually a simulation or a dream. In my opinion, The Matrix is a great example of how to get your audience to gradually accept more things without giving up. In the beginning, we are introduced to the main character, Thomas Anderson, also known by his hacker alias Neo. From the beginning, we get to see increasingly weird things happening to him, and then at one point, with a big twist, it all becomes justified. Those weird things weren't happening in the world as we know it. After being introduced to the Matrix as a concept, we understand that it's not reality, and its rules can be bent in ways the real world can't. In the film, two things ensure that we are not questioning what we are seeing. The Matrix, the setting that looks like our world, is a computer program. The program can be modified to make things possible that aren't when the laws of physics are dictated by nature and not lines of code. And the real world, outside the Matrix, is far in the future. I know humans make terrible batteries, and that's the only reason why the story is implausible, right? Limitless works because of consistency. The claims are outlandish, but not so much that you can't imagine the story happening in our world. Lucy doesn't work because of the lack of consistency. It keeps escalating one part of the story and expects the viewer to keep up while not providing good enough reasons to follow. The Matrix works while escalating because it provides explanations, retrospectively justifies why at the start things might have seemed kind of normal, but really weren't, and the entire setting becomes one big extreme, not just a part of it. None of these stories have accurate science behind them. Want a world where your characters can defy everything we know? I'm sorry, but that has to be different to the one we are living in. Inception did the same thing. Dreams could be a source of endless possibilities, and knowing it's not the real world, the viewer won't be bothered by the obviously impossible things. They would be bothered if the rules they established in the beginning didn't hold up all throughout. I think Lucy failed when they expected the audience to completely release their disbelief, only considering a small part while trying to maintain everything else. This made the plot feel like it was nonsensical. The audience was constantly told that everything around Lucy was normal while she's just casually disintegrating while sitting on a plane and typing really fast, and the only explanation we got was she uses more of her brain now. I want to bring up Marvel movies because I feel like those don't follow any rules, which could be its own entire essay. I really like the Marvel Cinematic Universe, but Jesus fuck, do they go against everything I just talked about. To be fair, I wouldn't consider them science fiction. They only have some science fiction elements to them, but also Norse gods and magic. Suspension of disbelief is on a different level when I'm watching a Marvel movie. Anything goes, and I won't be bothered by any of it. The difference between Lucy and Marvel films? Set expectations. I won't expect a story with superheroes and magic to offer me good explanations on how those things are possible. But I will expect a story claiming to be science fiction to at least provide something. This is why I did not like Lucy. I could not believe a single moment from where it started to where it went. They tried to make it seem like it's based on a real scientific concept, but it just felt like all it wanted was to be pretty, and none of the explanations were good enough, which is, I think, not ideal if you claim it's a science fiction. Am I being too harsh? I feel like I'm being too harsh. Look, I'm not saying you shouldn't care about scientific accuracy. It's fun to learn that an exciting thing would work the same way in reality, and I already said I appreciate those attempts a lot. Getting some basic things right can help to make a story feel more grounded. So if that's your goal, then trying to get the science right is a wonderful idea. Having fun is more of your goal, well, then there is even less to worry about. But science fiction can't and won't ever be completely accurate because you can't make science fiction without the fiction. But even without complete accuracy, you can still promote ideas that benefit scientific endeavors. Spock from Star Trek, the original series, is an icon. He's presented as very knowledgeable, cold, only relying on fact and logic and generally not understanding human emotions. He's the scientific officer of the Starship Enterprise, for which role his abilities are a great match. Many instances, however, show that even though logically speaking he's right, his cold demeanor only makes situations worse where the well-being of the crew is at stake. As the dude would put it,
"You're not wrong, Walter, you're just an asshole."
But his words hold great meaning when it comes to understanding of the world around us.
Insufficient facts always invites danger, Captain.
Unfortunately, many bad actors also relate to his character without realizing what they are doing is the furthest thing from critical thinking. Blanket distrust and cynicism aren't the same as critical thinking. Multiple studies have tried to look into the connections between science literacy and beliefs in conspiracy theories and largely found the same results. Teaching science also improved the students' critical thinking skills and reduced the likelihood of them having unfounded beliefs in conspiracies. Also, interestingly, a small foundation did a report on the subject as well, and they found that people who were not scientifically literate but identified themselves as critical thinkers were 63% more likely to believe in conspiracy theories. Scientific literacy involves a couple of things. People need to be aware of very basic knowledge, like the Earth is a globe and it orbits the Sun, but teaching only these conclusions is bad practice. Only knowing that the Earth is round but not understanding how several people got to that conclusion can leave people vulnerable to misinformation. Being scientifically literate allows you to differentiate fact from fiction without having a deep understanding of the field. For example, if you know that the brain has dedicated areas to different things without necessarily knowing what they do or where they are, you'll likely be at least skeptical of the 10% of the brain thing and might try to go deeper. That's all we can ask for. Understanding that anecdotes are not evidence. Just because your grandma says the polio vaccine is useless because she's had it and recovered fine doesn't mean everyone did. Knowing that correlations are not causations. Just because the lines of per capita margarine consumption and the divorce rates in the main seem to move together doesn't mean people who eat margarine are more likely to get divorced. Critical thinking and scientific literacy are bases that give you abilities to see why this graph doesn't make any sense, that an article that reports the beliefs of 12 parents is at best shaky evidence, knowing that being skeptical is very different to being in denial. The important stuff. You could be able to recite the entire periodic table by heart, but you could also still believe that pigeons are government drones that spy on us. And this is something I believe science fiction can help with. Star Trek is possibly one of my favorite examples of media that gets these key things right. Not scientifically, dilithium crystals, phasers, warp speed are all fiction, and introns are not a mysterious thing in your genome that can turn you into a different species. Introns are a thing, but not like this. This world shows a future I believe we should go for. Humans have finally managed to put our differences behind us, science and technology finally benefit everyone on Earth, and we can focus our efforts on exploring different worlds. There's a strict non-interference rule that, for example, Kirk breaks all the time, but that's beside the point right now. In Star Trek, science is not treated as the ultimate good. Multiple episodes explore hypothetical technologies and how they would benefit or not benefit humankind. In Season 2, Episode 24, The Ultimate Computer of the original series, a scientist creates a perfect artificial intelligence modeled after his own mind, rendering captains and most of the Starship crew disposable. But when it comes to decisions regarding other humans, the technology kills a bunch of people on a different ship because it was afraid of being turned off. What Star Trek does well is not representing existing technology or current scientific understanding. It shows a curious, knowledgeable crew that is fueled by their curiosity and embrace the unknown. Whenever they encounter something they've never seen before or something that shouldn't be possible by their current understanding, they don't dismiss it. They go in to investigate and to learn more. How else would you be able to explore strange new worlds? Curiosity is antithetical to dogmatic thinking. By being curious, you're allowing for the possibility to have your mind changed. And that's the key to critical thinking. You can know things, but you always leave room to learn more. Spotting misinformation and being able to evaluate evidence is not an easy task, and it requires practice. But I think it's worth it in the end. The world around us is full of ambiguities, misinformation, opinions disguised as facts. Knowing things aren't black and white is a start. A phrase attributed to Carl Sagan, extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence, can help you weigh the things you hear. If you tell me that aliens are real and visited the Earth, you need to follow up with evidence that can't be disputed at all. We can believe simpler claims without requiring evidence, like I won't demand proof that you had ham and eggs for breakfast. I might ask for a strong source if you say linen clothes will make you high, and I will dismiss most things regarding aliens visiting the Earth unless you can show me something that can't be explained by anything else, including people just making it up. The extremity of the evidence should match the extremity of the claim. Very often, though, you might not even need to demand proof. Look for an explanation that would easily explain the situation, and more often than not, it will be sufficient. Occam's razor states that the simplest explanation is usually the best one, the way it likely is with pyramids. How about we underestimate the abilities of past civilizations and not aliens built them? It's also probably good to keep in mind that someone having authority doesn't necessarily mean they are right about everything. Remember Watson, one of the couple people who solved the structure of the DNA double helix? Well, he has a long history of saying incredibly dumb shit that can't and shouldn't be taken seriously. Having a Nobel Prize doesn't mean he's all-knowing. I think we shouldn't worry a lot about films having inaccurate science. If we teach people to understand basic facts and logical reasoning, we won't have to worry as much about them believing obvious fiction. The thing about suspension of disbelief is that you are supposed to be doing it for the duration of the experience. Once the screen goes dark, you shouldn't believe in Superman anymore.